Hello, everyone. Okay, we're back again, reading from the book, Gods of the Bible. And I know it's been a couple of days since I've been reading. I've been kind of busy, um, selling my trees and such, and going through my other book that's caught my attention again, the Nag Hammadi Scriptures. But we're not going to talk about that right now. We're going to continue with the reading. We were on chapter 9, and we were talking that this chapter was about people of property, and we went over the chosen people, Elyon. No foreign El was with Yahweh, again signifying there's more than one Elohim. Or why would Yahweh even mention, or was it even mentioned that there's no other El was with Yahweh? And we're going to start on page 164, the sign of the choice. So let's get started. Okay. Once Israel is chosen, Yahweh imposes a sign of recognition upon them. Its members will bear a mark similar to that of cattle, whose individual animals are marked to distinguish them from other cattle. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be a sign of the covenant between me and you. What a sign. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household or bought with money from a foreigner, those who are not your offspring. That's Genesis 17, verses 10 through 12. The Mullah, circumcision, will be the sign of the covenant between the Yahweh and his people. Tradition explains the choice of the genital organ as the focus of circumcision because the foreskin is the only part of the body that can be removed without causing actual mutilation. However, we cannot but notice another aspect that the tradition does not emphasize with regard to circumcision. The result of it is a physical sign, distinct, hidden, but verifiable when necessary. The covenant members identified in this way could also be kept under control, as we can see when considering the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. It is Yahweh who says so without any interpretive doubt. Genesis 17:11. Okay, and again we have the Hebrew to English translation. And be shall, for like, sign of, covenant between me and between you. If this were not clear enough, Yahweh gives a stern command in the following verse. An uncircumcised man shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. The circumcised foreskin is the most important sign of belonging to the covenant group, and whoever does not wear it will be cut off. And in parentheses, it has killed. Killed? With a question mark. We know that the foreskin treatment also has hygienic significance that is not secondary, especially in the way of life where it was not easy to follow even simple personal cleanliness practices. However, the two aspects are coherent. We are dealing with two objectives achieved by a single action: simple fidelity, control, and hygienic requirements. The next subtopic is the Table of Nations. Let us now introduce another element to illuminate our path further. Genesis 10:21 states that, again, Hebrew to English translation, Shem, father of all children of Eber. So from Sim descends Eber, who has two sons, Joktan and Peleg. The latter is described with a fascinating remark. He was called Peleg because Genesis 10:25, Hebrew to English translation, in days of him was divided the earth. The name Peleg is derived, let me put the window down again, because Johnny told me that. And it's going to cause me to sound like I'm in a drum. So pardon me. Let's try it again. The name of Peleg is derived from the verb palag, which means to divide. Let us now outline, for the sake of clarity, what the Old Testament tells us about the precise sequence of events. Shem is the forefather of the Hebrews, the children of Eber or Ever, Genesis 10:21. Ever is the great-grandson of Shem or Sim, Genesis 10:24. Peleg is a direct son of Eber, Genesis 10:25. During this division, as seen above, the Jewish people are assigned to Yahweh, who finds them wandering in the desert, Deuteronomy 32:9-12. Genesis 10 is also known as the Table of Nations because it lists the descendants of the patriarch Noah who escaped the flood and attempts to explain how humanity was restored through him. It contains the genealogies of Noah's descendants, divided by families scattered across the earth after the flood. These are the clans of Noah's sons, according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these nations spread out over the earth after the flood, Genesis 10:32. In addition to the Hebrews, the Table of Nations also mentions other people. But let us focus on the Hebrews for a moment. We are all used to thinking that the Hebrew people originated with Abraham. Still, here we have just been confronted with the precise statement that Eber is, in fact, their eponym. Eber is the ancestor of many peoples, and his lineage is divided into two separate lines, headed by his two sons, Peleg and Joktan. From Joktan descended many peoples who then dispersed between Africa and the east. We shall return to him in a moment. From Peleg, on the other hand, descended Abram, whose name will be changed to Abraham, for he will become, as Yahweh says, the father of many nations, Genesis 17:5. So the Hebrews descended from Abraham, but their progenitor is undoubtedly Eber. We're dealing with a possible contradiction here, but it is the Bible that it is the Bible itself that clarifies the matter in Genesis 14:13. A man runs to bring news. Hebrew to English translation, to Abram, the Hebrew. According to Genesis, Abraham was already a Hebrew as he belonged to the lineage of Eber, mentioned in Genesis 10:21. Thus the Hebrews as an ethnic group existed before Abraham. We have seen that Eber had many descendants, so here we establish a crucial fact. Abraham's descendants were not only the Hebrew peoples. Having established that the definition of Hebrews includes other peoples beyond Abraham's lineage, let us proceed with the story of the call of Abraham as found in Genesis 12, verses 1-3. Yahweh instructs Abram to leave the land of his fathers with the promise to make him a great nation. The promise is repeated in Genesis 17:4 through 7, where Yahweh again chooses Abram to carry out his plan. On this occasion, the patriarch's name becomes Abraham. The Bible tells of 8 sons of Abraham, 1 by the Egyptian servant Hagar, 6 by Keturah, and finally Isaac, born of Sarah, a Hebrew woman who belonged to the same family. From Isaac on, all the descendants of Abraham are no longer mentioned, but only the descendants of Isaac, born with the genetic group of the family. The decision to preserve the purity of the blood continues after Isaac. Abraham marries him within his kinship, Genesis 24 verses 3 through 4. And from Isaac's marriage, 2 sons are born, Esau and Jacob. Esau marries a Canaanite woman and is therefore excluded from the official lineage, whereas Jacob agrees to choose a wife within his father's family, Genesis 28:1 through 5. So Jacob preserves the genetic purity of the family. He takes the name Israel, and from then on, all his descendants are called children of Israel. So only the Israelites kept and preserved their core Hebrew identity, but they did not call themselves Ivri or Hebrew. Other people called them that. The terms Hebrew and Israelites only became synonymous over time. For the sake of clarity, let it be said that we deliberately do not address the thorny issues that arise from examining extra-biblical documents from which different origins for Abraham and his family are inferred. Let us now look at the table of nations from a different perspective. The next subtopic is, were Sumerians also Semites? Sumerians possessed extraordinary knowledge in all fields and disciplines: writing, literature, agronomy, engineering, geometry, metallurgy, astronomy, and timekeeping, units of measurement, civil and criminal law, public government and administration, taxation, accounting, transportation systems, music and dance, education and schooling. They had dozens of terms by which they identified oil and its derivatives. In the field of building, they showed extraordinary expertise, which is also confirmed in the Bible, Genesis 11, verses 1 through 4. Modern science has proven through laboratory tests that fired clay bricks are 5 times stronger than sun-dried bricks. Sumerian architects used dried bricks for basic structures, while the fired bricks were used for parts of the building that were subject to extraordinary stresses, such as stairs, projecting architectural elements, structures that were particularly exposed to the elements. Everything was then held together by bitumen, which served as cement. As anyone can easily understand, if this population was so great in all fields of knowledge, they could not have gone unnoticed. However, as Sumerian scholar S.N. Kramer already pointed out, the Old Testament only incidentally mentions the land of Shinar, Genesis 10:10. Zechariah 5:11 identified as Sumer. But the Bible never mentions the Sumerians explicitly. In the so-called Table of Nations that we introduced in the previous section of this chapter, all the peoples who lived in the territories of the Middle East and beyond are listed: Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Canaanites, Philistines, Hurrians, Hittites, Moabites, Ethiopians, Amorites, Evies, Akkadians, those of Cyprus, Rhodes, Parshi, Ophir. Sumerians are not mentioned. How could the Bible forget the people from whom the Old Testament drew most of its original content? Is this an incomprehensible and unforgivable omission? Kramer's teacher, A. Pobel, claimed that the Hebrews were, in fact, the direct descendants of the Sumerians. By this logic, the Bible does not mention them explicitly because when it speaks of the Hebrews, it speaks of a direct descendant branch of the Sumerians. Official historiography considers the Akkadians the first Semitic people, but within our declared working methodology, we wonder, were the Sumerians also Semites? We try to answer this question with the help of the Bible itself. Genesis 10:21 informs us that Shem, the son of Noah, had various sons from whom descended populations that history knows well: Ashur, Elam, Aram, and so on. Eber, the forefather of the Hebrews, descended from one of these sons, as seen in the previous section. Apropos of Shem, Kramer and Pobel stress some exciting aspects. The correct spelling of the original cuneiform writing is Shumer and not Sumer. The Bible uses the consonant Scin for the name Sem, so the correct spelling for Sem is in fact Shem, the spelling that we have also used in this book. The Hebrew word for the name is Shem and corresponds to the Akkadian Shuma because the Hebrew E corresponds to the vowel U of the cuneiform script. The word Shumer was pronounced Shumi or Shum. Furthermore, Sumer was in Mesopotamia, east of Palestine. Mesopotamia is traditionally the original homeland of the patriarch Abram, according to the Bible, Genesis 15:7 and 24:10. Although this issue is controversial and involves various hypotheses, we know that Abram was a descendant of Eber, and his son Isaac continued the genetically pure line of the Hebrews as seen in the previous section. The marriage customs used by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to secure their lineage were the same as those used by the Sumerian rulers and the Anunnaki, the Sumerian gods. Dynastic descent was ensured by marrying a woman from the same family, usually a half-sister, to preserve genetic purity. Following these dynastic customs, Abraham explicitly says of his wife, "Sarah is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not of my mother, and she became my wife." Genesis 20:12. The marriage customs of Abraham and his family perfectly match those of the Sumerian rulers and the Anunnaki. Is this a coincidence? The name Isaac is said to derive from the Akkadian, derived from Sumeria, Ishaku, a title that denoted the highest authority in the city. This consideration suggests that Abraham's family held a position of power in society, from which he moved to settle in the territory his Elohim had designated for him. Is it a coincidence that the name of one of the founding patriarchs of the people, Isaac, is derived from an Akkadian term for a high administrative office? Only one part is missing to complete the picture: the question of the area where the Sumerians lived, the south of Mesopotamia, which lies east of Palestine. Once again, the Bible comes to our rescue when it lists Joktan's sons and tells us that in Genesis 10:29 through 30, Hebrew to English translation again, and was dwelling there from Misha into, come to, until to Sephar, Mount of the East. Joktan's sons occupied Misa, probably the area of present-day Arabia, which extended along the Arabian Peninsula to Sephar, the present-day Zufar, mountains above the Arabian Sea. We still need to determine whether the last part of the verse indicates that Sephar is an eastern mountain range or whether the sons of Joktan reached another undefined mountain range to the east. Still, the Bible tells us that some of the descendants of Shem moved eastward. Recall that Joktan was the son of Eber and thus a Hebrew, just like the sons of Abraham, descendants of Peleg, Joktan's brother. Up to this point, we have dealt with the descendants of Noah's sons, especially the descendants of Shem, and the need to preserve a certain genetic purity through marriages that were celebrated and thus controlled within the family circle. From this point of view, however, Noah himself presents a possible curiosity that leads us down this path in search of the meaning of the hypothetical selection of people. The question of the possible Hebraism of the Sumerians remain, of course, open. I'm trying to see how many more pages in this chapter. Still quite a few pages. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and we'll start again on page 171, where we'll go over the topic Noah and the Watchers. So see you next time.